Hello everyone! In this lesson, we're going to look at the steps to dual boot Windows 10 and Windows 11 on the same computer. A dual boot or multi-boot system defines the process of installing two operating systems on a single computer, allowing you to choose which one to boot from using the bootloader during startup. If you want to set up a dual boot system, you can do this in three different ways. You can shrink and create a new partition on the primary hard drive to make the space to install the second operating system. You can install a new version of Windows on a separate hard drive, or you can use a virtual drive to install Windows 11 without the need to use a USB bootable media. Before proceeding, you must understand that setting up a dual boot system using Windows 11 and Windows 10 is different from configuring Windows 10 and Windows 11. The reason is that Windows 11 has a higher system requirement than Windows 10, and if you don't confirm the requirements, you might not be able to complete the setup. So if you have a computer running Windows 10, you have to make sure that it meets the minimum requirements. Basically, you have to make sure that the hard drive or partition that you're going to be using has at least 64 gigabytes of storage. You also have to make sure that the system is using UEFI firmware type, and you also have to make sure that the Trusted Platform Module version 2.0 is enabled in the motherboard of the system. In addition, you also have to make sure that the device has a supported AMD or Intel processor. I will be leaving a link in the video description for more details on how to check the system requirements to install Windows 11. In addition, you have to make sure that the computer can boot from USB, but since these steps are different depending on the computer, it is recommended to check your device maker documentation for more specific details. Since you will be using the same hardware, you might be able to activate Windows with the same product key, assuming that you're using a compatible version of the operating system, such as Windows 11 and Windows 10. Finally, if you want to avoid any issues, it is recommended not to use BitLocker encryption with this setup. Okay, let's dive into steps to set up a dual boot system. First, we're going to look at steps to set up a dual boot system using a partition or a separate hard drive, and you can use these instructions on a supported or unsupported hardware. To start, open the web browser and go to this page to download the Rufus tool. We could use the Microsoft Media Creation tool to download the Windows 11 ISO, but I'm going to use the Rufus tool because it allows us to download the ISO file and create a USB bootable media for supported and unsupported hardware. And from the page, just click the link to download the latest version and save it to your computer. Then open the folder and double click the file to run the tool. If you get this message, click the Yes button. Make sure to connect a USB bootable media with at least 8 gigabytes of storage. Then click the down arrow button and select the download option. Then click the download button. Now we're going to choose the operating system that we want to install, and in this case we're going to be selecting Windows 11 and then click continue. Then under release, just leave the default option because you can only select the latest release of Windows 11 and click continue. In addition, also leave the defaults because you can only choose this one option. Then click continue. Select your language and click continue. For architecture, you can also only choose one option for Windows 11, which is x64. So just leave that default and click the download button. And now save the ISO image on your computer. Once the ISO file has been downloaded and you selected the USB drive that you want to use to create the bootable media, you can change the value label if you want, and then click the start button. Make sure that if you have anything important on the flash drive that you remove it before continuing, because this process will delete everything on that USB drive. And this is why we're using Rufus, because it allows us to create a bootable media that bypasses the system requirements if you have a computer with unsupported hardware. And by default, it automatically selects to remove the requirements for the 4 gigabytes of RAM, Secure Boot, and TPM 2.0, and it also removes the requirements to set up the installation with an online Microsoft account. Now, if you have a computer that meets the requirements to install Windows 11, you can clear these options and then click OK, and then click Yes. Now, as I said before, you can set up a dual boot system on a separate partition inside of the main hard drive, or you can use a separate hard drive. And to confirm the options that are available to you, we're going to use the disk management tool. And to do that, open Start and look for disk management. It will also show up as a create and format hard disk partitions. On the application, we can see that we have the two options. We have a second hard drive that we can use to install Windows 11, and we also have the primary hard drive with the main partition where Windows 10 is installed, but we can shrink this partition to create the space to install Windows 11. So if you do not have a second hard drive, you're gonna have to right click the primary partition where Windows 10 is installed and then select the shrink volume option. From here, we're going to shrink the primary partition to make room for the new installation. And in here, we're just going to type in megabytes how much space we want to shrink. And for Windows 11, you need at least 64 gigabytes, but I'm going to use 70,000 megabytes to get roughly 70 gigabytes that I can use to install Windows 11. And then click the shrink button. And as you can see, now we have some allocated space that we can use to install Windows 11. And since the Windows setup will configure all the partitions, you don't need to do anything else here if you want to use a partition inside of the main hard drive. Now, if you want to install Windows 11 on a separate hard drive, this is not a requirement, but you want to make sure to delete any of the partitions inside of the drive that you want to use, and make sure to back up all the data, if any, because this process will delete anything on that drive. And to do that, just right click the partition and select the delete volume option, and then click yes. And now you're ready to continue with installation of Windows 11 to create a dual boot system. And also remember to make sure that you can boot the computer from USB. And as I said before, you might need to check your computer manufacturer to know the specific steps on how to change the UEFI BIOS in order to proceed with installation. So the next step is to restart the computer and boot with the USB bootable media to continue with installation of Windows 11. Alright, on the Windows setup, click Next and click the Install Now button. Now click the I don't have a product key option to continue. Now select the edition of Windows 11 that you want to install on the computer, and then click Next. And then we're going to choose the custom install. And on this page, that's where you're going to select the partition or the separate drive where you want to install Windows 11 as a dual boot system. So in our case, on drive 0, we recently created the unallocated space by shrinking the partition of the C drive. And as you can see, we have roughly 70 gigabytes that we can use to install Windows 11. However, if you have a second hard drive, you can select it right here too to continue with installation. But for this video, I'm going to install Windows 11 on the unallocated space that I created on the primary hard drive, and then click Next to continue with installation. And now we're just going to complete the setup. And first I'm going to choose the region, the keyboard layout. The computer rebooted automatically, and as you can see, we get the boot manager. And to continue, we're going to select Windows 11. Confirm a name for the computer. This is an optional step. When you assign a computer name during the setup, the computer is going to restart. So once again, we need to select the operating system to continue. Here we're going to select this option, and this is only available on Windows 11 Pro. Windows 10 Home does not have this option. Now we're going to create an account. During the initial setup of Windows 11, you can now restore settings and apps, credentials, and files, but you can always choose to set up the device as a new installation. And to do that, go to More Options and select this option. Now we're going to create a pin. Now I'm just going to use the default selections for the privacy settings. I'm going to skip this option, this one as well. Now I'm going to skip this too, and the rest of the offers. And that's it. Now we just created a dual boot system with Windows 11 and Windows 10. I'm going to restart the computer so you can see the bootloader with the options to choose which operating system to start. So every time that you start the computer moving forward, you're going to get to the bootloader that is going to give you the options to choose which operating system to start. If you don't do this in the first 30 seconds, the system will choose automatically the operating system that is at the top of the list. In this case, Windows 11. But now I'm going to choose Windows 10 because I want to go through the steps to remove Windows 11 in this case, so you can undo the changes and restore the single boot system. And to do that, open Start and look for the Disk Management app, and then right click the partition that has the operating system that you want to delete, in this case Windows 11, and select the delete value option. We're gonna click yes, and now we have this portion of the drive that we can use to extend the drive C, which includes the primary operating system, in this case Windows 10. And to do that, we right click on the C drive and we're going to select the extend volume option. And here we're just gonna go through the wizard, which basically is all next, next, next. And just like that, you went from a dual boot system to a single boot system. So let's say that you created the dual boot system on a separate hard drive. The process will be similar to the partition method. Basically, the only thing that you have to do to remove the operating system is just to right click the partition on that drive that includes the operating system and just delete that volume. You can always repurpose the drive by right clicking and creating a new volume. And now you can store data on that drive. Once you go through this process, the system will automatically remove the bootloader. So the next time that you restart the computer, it will load automatically on the default version of Windows that is installed on the computer. You can also create a dual boot system without having to use a USB bootable media and without changing anything on the current setup, and that is by using a virtual hard disk or VHDX. After you finish configuring this process, there is no virtualization involved, and Windows 11 will be able to take full advantage of the hardware. You can also use this method to create a dual boot system on a computer running Windows 10 or 11, and you can use 11 or 10 as the second operating system. It is important to note that in the past, you were not able to upgrade a system using a native boot with a VHDX, but you should now be able to complete the upgrade to another version of the operating system. If that doesn't work, you may need to delete and recreate the setup. Now, to complete the process, you will need to download the ISO file of Windows 11, which you can do with the Rufus tool, or you can go directly to the Microsoft support website. And on this page, we just need to go to the bottom, and from here, we're just going to select Windows 11, click the download option, select the language, and then just click the download button right here. I already saved the ISO file on this computer, so I'm not going to download it again. If you're using the Rufus tool, you can select the download option, and once you selected the settings, click the download button and choose the folder where you want to save the ISO, and once downloaded, you can close the application, and then you will have the ISO on the folder that you specify. Now we're going to go to the process to create the virtual hard drive, and to do that, open Start and look for Disk Management and open the app, then go to Action and select the Create VHD option. And the location setting, we're going to specify where we want to save the virtual drive, and you can use the main drive or a separate hard drive. In this case, I'm just going to store it on the root of the C drive. And now I'm going to confirm a name for the drive, and I'm just going to name it Windows 11 Dual Boot. And here I'm going to specify 70 gigabytes. I'm going to use the VHDX option, and I'm going to choose the dynamic expanding option. And with these settings, we can create the virtual hard drive. Now from here, I'm going to initialize the drive by right-clicking the drive, not the partition or the empty space, but the drive, and select the initialize disk option. Just use the default settings and click OK. Now we're going to create a volume on this drive, and to do that, right-click the unallocated space, select the new simple drive option, and just go through the wizard using the default settings. And now to install Windows 11, we need to locate the ISO file for Windows 11, and you can double click to mount it, but you can also right click and select the mount option. Confirm the drive letter for the virtual CD-ROM drive with installation files. In this case, that's the F drive. Now we're going to open command prompt, and we're going to open the application as an administrator. In here, we're going to jump into the F drive by typing F, semicolon, enter, and from here we're going to open the sources folder, and to do that we're going to type this command, cd sources, and press enter. And now we need to apply the Windows image into the virtual hard drive to complete the installation. But first you need to make sure that you know the edition of Windows that you're going to be installing. For example, in my case, I want to install Windows 11 Pro, but because you don't have an interface to choose what operating system to install, you're going to have to do that manually. And to do that, we're going to be using this command. And as you can see, you have a list of all the operating system included on the installation files, and we're looking for the Windows 11 Pro, which in this case there's the index of 6. So knowing that, now we can use this command to apply the image, but on the index option, make sure to change it to the edition of Windows 11 that you want to install. And in here, make sure to change the drive letter to the letter of the hard disk drive, which in my case is E, but it can be something different on your computer. Once you're ready to apply the image, just press enter. And doing it this way, you don't need a bootable USB media to do an installation of Windows 11. However, you will still need to go through the out-of-box experience to complete the setup of Windows 11 on a dual boot system with Windows 11. After applying the image, we need to register the installation with the bootloader. And to do that, we're going to be using this command. Make sure to change E for the drive letter that corresponds to the virtual drive where you applied the image. And now we should be able to restart the computer and continue with the setup of Windows 11 on a dual boot system. And now from the bootloader, we're just going to select Windows 11 to continue with the setup. And then from here, once again, we need to go through the out-of-box experience to complete the installation of Windows 11. I'm just going to go quickly through this configuration because we've already seen it. And that's it. Now we have created a dual boot system with Windows 11 and Windows 10 using a virtual hard drive without having to modify the original setup that you had on your computer. Now I'm going to restart the computer into Windows 10 to show you how you can undo these changes on the computer if you no longer need a dual boot system. On the bootloader, we're just going to choose the Windows 10 option. Now, if you want to remove the operating system, you just need to go to the location where you have the virtual drive and just right click on it and select the delete option. You also need to go to the system configuration settings to remove the entry for the bootloader. And to do that, open Start, open the run command, and then use the msconfig command and click OK. And now we're going to go to the boot section. And from here, you need to select, in this case, Windows 11, and click the delete option to remove the entry from the bootloader. So the next time that you start the computer, it will boot straight into Windows 10 in this case. But I'm not going to undo the changes just now because I also want to highlight some troubleshooting steps and some configurations that you might want to do in order to get everything working. So now let's say that you don't see the boot menu on startup And if that is the case, you need to enable the bootloader. And to do that, open Start and look for Command Prompt and open it as an administrator. Now, the fast startup option on Windows can also cause different issues with the bootloader, and if that is the case, you might need to disable that feature. You have several ways to do that, and check the video description to find the link for the video where I have the different ways that you can do this. But let me just show you one way, and that is using Command Prompt. And to do that, open Start and look for Command Prompt and run it as administrator, and then just use this command and press Enter. And now the next time that you restart the computer, you will see the boot menu to choose the operating system. You can also choose the operating system that will start by default, and you can do that through the bootloader or through the system configuration settings. And to do that, open Start, look for the run command, and then let's just go to the msconfig settings, and on boot, select the operating system that you want to make the default, and then just click the Set as a Default button, and then click Apply, and then OK. Also, on a dual boot system, you can also change the time for the bootloader to execute the default operating system. And to do that, open Start and let's just go back to the run command, and let's go to the msconfig settings, to the boot options, and here on the timeout setting, you can change this to anything you want in seconds. Let's say 15 seconds. And then to apply the settings, click Apply and click OK. And here we're at the bootloader, and as you can see, Windows 11 is set as a VHD, so you know that that operating system is running on a virtual drive. From here, we can go to this option right here, and that will open this page where you can change the timeout for the bootloader, and you can set it to 5 minutes, 30 seconds, or 5 seconds. So if you don't choose an operating system when setting the timer, when the timer runs out, it will load the default operating system that you configured. And if you want to choose a different operating system as the default, you can use this option right here and just select the operating system that you want to make the default. And just like that, we can see that the current default operating system is Windows 11. You also have access to other options, and that will just go to the Windows recovery environment, where you can do some troubleshooting and access different tools. And that's it. Those are the different methods that you can use to create a dual boot system with 2 versions of Windows. Remember to like the video, leave your comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and I just hope this video was informative for you, and I would like to thank you for viewing.